Welcome back. I'm going to continue on with muscles here. We're going to start with the concept of a muscle twitch. So, a muscle twitch is not what popular lingo would call a muscle twitch. Usually, if somebody says, my muscle's twitching, it's because, they've got a muscle that is contracting and relaxing really quickly. That's not what we're talking about here. So a muscle twitch is the response of a muscle to a single action potential. So a set of muscle fibers to a single action potential. This is something that is only observable in the lab because in the body there's never a point where we could isolate a single action potential. So this is something that we can only record in a lab. We use what's called a myogram to record the response of the muscle. And when we do, we can see that we end up with 3 separate phases to a muscle twitch. We have time here, tension here. So we have your point of stimulation, and for this period right here, we're in what's called the latent period. Nothing's happening here. So we haven't actually generated any force or tension in the muscle, which means we haven't made any cross bridges. So this period right here, the latent period, is going to correspond to excitation, contraction, coupling. So when the action potential is traveling along the sarcolemma, diving down into the T-tubules, causing the voltage change, we get calcium coming back out into the cell. Then we begin to see, as the calcium increases and we begin to go through the cross-bridge cycling, we begin to generate tension. And we will generate tension until the acetylcholine is removed, and we begin at this point into the relaxation phase to pump the calcium back into the SR. So we see a decrease in the tension of the muscle, and then we basically go back to the base level. So during the latent period, we're going through excitation, contraction, coupling. Contraction period, we're going through cross-bridge cycling. Relaxation, we are pumping all of the calcium back into the SR. Now, every single twitch does not look the same. So in other words, there's not a generic muscle twitch. Here we're looking at the length of a twitch for 3 different muscles in the body. The blue represents the lateral rectus muscle of your eye. It's what allows you to pull your eye lateral to change what you're looking at. The green is gastrocnemius, the big chunky muscle in your calf. And the red is soleus, the much flatter calf muscle that lies deep to gastrocnemius. So, your eye, the entire twitch takes about 20 milliseconds. So it goes through this entire process there of latent contraction, relaxation in 20 milliseconds. Gastrocnemius takes about 80 to do the same thing, and soleus takes about 200. The lateral rectus, or the blue muscle, is a very fast twitch muscle. It goes through the entire process really quickly. And in fact, your lateral rectus muscle, to get to 200 milliseconds, would have to go through this 10 separate times to get to 200 milliseconds, which means that it's going to fatigue really quickly, because within this same time frame, lateral rectus would have to contract 10 different times. Gastrocnemius would only have to contract maybe about 3 times. Soleus would only have to contract once. The faster the twitch, the more fatigable the muscle is. Like if you pull your eyes, if I say, hey, look to your right, then your eyes are going to contract these rectus muscles, but you can't look over there forever. Your eye muscles get really tired really quickly because every 20 milliseconds they're going through a twitch. Gastrocnemius is the muscle in your calf that allows you to go up onto your tippy toes, allows you to jump. You can jump for a little bit. Okay, you can't jump all day though, because your muscle will fatigue. Soleus, on the other hand, is what allows you to stand. You may not want to stand all day, but you can absolutely stand pretty much all day because soleus is contracting far fewer times within the given time period than the other two. Okay, so the faster the twitch, the easier and faster the muscle is going to fatigue. The slower the twitch, the less fatigable the muscle. All right, so let's talk about a motor unit here. This is the actual connection between a muscle and its neuron coming out of the central nervous system. So here we've got our spinal cord, and we've got two motor neurons coming to one of your muscles in your leg here, okay? So we have purple, we have green. So first of all, you can see that purple is going to affect some of the cells in each of your fascicles. Green is going to affect some of the cells in your fascicles. So it's not a one-to-one relationship. The contacts with the fibers in a muscle tend to be spread out throughout the muscle. So if you picture if purple neuron fires here, then there will be a weak response in the entire muscle because purple is talking to muscle cells through the whole muscle. If green responds and fires, then there will be a weak response throughout the whole muscle. Okay, so when we talk about the connection between the neuron and the muscle, it is widespread. Okay, when we were looking in our previous lecture about the neuromuscular junction, we were just looking at one synaptic knob of a neuron. But in fact, there are multiple branches that come off of this, and each one is going to interact with a different fiber. So a motor unit is defined as the motor neuron and all of the fibers it is going to connect to. So here we're looking at purple and green. We have really big motor units where you have hundreds of fibers connected to one neuron. This is really common in the big muscles of your body, your quadriceps, your hamstrings, the postural muscles of your back and neck. Here, these are very what we would call bulk action muscles. Flex the hip, extend the hip, flex the knee, extend the knee. Those are not precise. I mean, it's a pretty straightforward movement. It's a hinge joint, okay? But they're very strong. I mean, they allow us to stand all day, things like that. Small motor units, you can have one neuron connected to as few as 4 fibers. Here you're going to find these in your eyes, where we need to consistently make very small adjustments to our gaze, and things like your fingers. So you should be taking notes right now. So look down at your fingers and watch the teeny tiny adjustments that you have to make muscularly to write the different letters of the alphabet. Those are very, very precise. If you write a capital T versus a capital F, those are very different letters, but very small differences. You have to get really precise to get the differentiation between those two. So the smaller the motor unit, the more precise the movement. The larger the motor unit, less precise movement, something super straightforward like flexion or extension of the knee. But it's a lot stronger. So your hamstrings, your quadriceps, these muscles are much stronger than the muscles in your fingers or your eyes. Okay, so we're talking about a difference in strength, and we're talking about a difference in the precision of movement. Now, we do not always contract our muscles to the highest possible degree. And in fact, if we did, we have enough cross-bridge potential in our muscles to tear them right off the bones. So we generally are not using all of this possible strength in our muscles. And we learn how to grade our muscle responses. I'll give you an example of this. want you to picture you're going to pick up a hot cup of coffee. So that cup of coffee is in a styrofoam mug. You're going to apply a certain amount of force to the cup to pick it up so that you don't drop it, but also you're not going to apply so much force that you crush the cup and you got hot coffee all over your hand. Same cup of coffee, now it's in a ceramic mug. You're going to apply a different amount of force. You're going to have to hold on a little harder, apply a little bit more force because the cup is heavier, but you're also not at risk of crushing the cup with your hand. So same action, picking up a cup of coffee, but you grade the muscle response. If it's a styrofoam cup, you apply less pressure, less tension. If it's a ceramic cup, you're going to apply more. So the question then becomes, how do you change your response? How do you grade your response? And we have two ways that we do this, and we usually use them together. The first is recruitment. Here, we're going to change the stimulus coming into the muscle, and that is going to help recruit motor units. The more motor units we have, the more cross bridges we're going to get. So here, this is your stimulation to the nerve. The nerve is not going to fire at all until you get to a threshold voltage. And so here you've got your threshold. We see a small number of motor units respond, and you get a little tiny bit of tension in the muscle. If you go through recruitment, we increase the stimulus, more motor units respond, more tension. Again, we keep going, we keep going, we keep going. Eventually, we'll get to maximal stimulus. So here is the stimulus where 100% of our motor units are contracting. We are at maximal contraction. After that, it doesn't matter if you add stimulus, you're already at 100%. So one of the ways that we can change the amount of tension a muscle is going to generate is going to be by recruiting motor units. The more you have, the more tension. The other way is called summation. So now instead of increasing the intensity of the stimulus, we're going to increase the frequency of the stimulus here. So if we think about a muscle twitch, we know that we have our twitch, we go up, we come back, and here is where we are pumping all the calcium back into the SR. And if we don't stimulate the muscle again, and the muscle comes all the way back down to the baseline, and then we stimulate again, you're going to get the exact same response. Okay. But over here, if we increase the frequency of the stimulus, we begin to piggyback. So before this comes all the way back down, in other words, before the calcium is fully returned to the SR, you send another stimulus through. That's going to cause more calcium to be released. And then you keep doing this. And it means, in terms of what's happening in the muscle, is you're never really getting rid of all the calcium. You're actually gaining calcium as you go, which is allowing more cross bridges to occur, which is allowing tension to generate in the muscle. So this is called summation. So you're basically adding on to the force that was generated in the previous twitch. Now here, if you had crazy high stimulus, you could go into what's called tetany. Okay, so complete fused tetanus. We cannot generate frequency that fast under normal physiological conditions in the body. It is not something that we are capable of doing, and that is good because we do not want any sort of fused, sustained types of contractions where there's no way to get that calcium back into the SR because it means the muscle cannot relax. And if you're wondering, the disease tetanus is named after this, not the other way around. So by both recruiting the number of motor units and increasing or decreasing the frequency of stimulus, we have a huge capacity for grading our muscle responses. When you go pick something up with your two hands, You could be picking up a pencil and you apply just enough pressure to pick it up, or you could be picking up, 4 textbooks. Totally different amounts there. Okay, so we have a massive ability to grade the amount of tension that our muscles are going to generate depending on the load sitting in front of us. So let's talk about how a contraction works in the muscle as a whole instead of at kind of the myofilament level. So we have what are called isotonic contractions. This is what you would think of as a muscle contraction because the muscle does change in length and it moves the load that is on it. This actually does come in 2 versions though. What you're probably most familiar with if I said describe a muscle contraction would be what's called a concentric contraction. A concentric contraction is when the muscle shortens. An eccentric contraction is when it lengthens. In both of these cases, the length is changing, therefore it's an isotonic contraction. So here, let's talk about you're at the gym, you got your weight here. When she flexes her elbow, then this muscle is going to shorten to pull up on these bones and allow that movement to occur. So let's say she's doing her curls here, and she pulls this up. She's not just going to drop the weight to the floor from that point. She is going to then extend the elbow. And while triceps back here is contracting to pull these bones back down, the biceps are maintaining tension on this. In other words, you don't just drop your weight down. It would injure your arm if you did that. You hold tension while you're going in the opposite direction, lengthening the fibers out. That is an eccentric contraction. So if she's going to sit here and she's going to do curls, she's going to be doing concentric, eccentric, eccentric. Okay. Isotonic contractions, the length of the muscle is going to change. Isometric contractions is when you're going to be generating tension, but the muscle is not able to generate enough tension to move the load, at least temporarily, perhaps fully. I'll give you an example. Let's say I go outside. I'm like, woohoo, I'm going to pick up my car. Okay, cool. I'm going to walk over to the bumper and I'm going to pull up on it. Now, my muscles are really going to generate tension. I mean, they are going to be contracting, but they will not be changing in length because I assure you, I do not have enough strength to pick up my car. But it doesn't mean that they're not generating tension. It just means that the load is too much and they cannot overcome it. So here, if you're just sitting here and the muscle is just holding on, okay, that is an isometric contraction. Those of you who like to do plank, that is an isometric contraction. And if you're like, oh, hey, that's probably not all that hard, I say get down into plank and hold it for a minute. You're going to find that it is pretty difficult to hold that type of contraction. And in fact, is often harder than isotonic. Now, when you are beginning any sort of activity, most of the time, let's say you go to pick up a really heavy box, okay? There's going to be, even if it's, really super fractional, there's going to be a period of time when you're in an isometric phase where you're pulling on the box, but it hasn't moved yet because you haven't generated enough tension. You don't have enough cross bridges yet. But then the tension will increase to the point where you're able to actually move the load. At that point, the muscle length is going to begin to shorten. So even in our most, basic contractions, we generally go from isometric to isotonic. Now, this is assuming that you can pick up the box. If you can't pick up the box because, it's filled with, steel or something like that, then you're going to stay in an isometric phase, just like me trying to pick up my car. It's not going anywhere, okay? All right, last thing to talk about here is the concept of muscle tone. So this is the idea that your muscles are pretty much always slightly contracted. So there's always some motor units firing due to spinal reflexes. So there is a constant uh, stimulation, very, very low level in most cases, but a constant stimulation that is allowing just a few of your motor units to respond, not enough to actually cause, flexion of your arm or something like that, but just to activate the muscle. This is what keeps your muscles working. Okay, it keeps them like sort of ready to go. They're always being activated just a little. Is it enough to keep them, in the best possible shape? No, definitely not. You need to work them out for that. But they're always responding at least a little bit. And this is one of the really important things when it comes to things like posture and the stabilizing effect that muscles have on your joints. So therefore, the weaker your muscles get and the less this response works, which kind of happens with aging, the less stable our joints are, the less posture control we have, things like that. So we want to make sure that our muscles try to stay in good working order, which is something that we're